6 years after a little girl vanished mid-ride on a carousel, her seat found empty, safety strap still buckled, a child calling herself Lila walked into Crescent Hollow Elementary with no memory, no records, and a drawing of that very carousel, now long destroyed. But the drawing showed something no one ever knew. 8 eyes watching from beneath the platform, and when her mother arrived, the girl whispered one chilling line before vanishing again. The afternoon sun shimmered over Crescent Hollow, a quiet Oregon town where fall seemed to settle a little deeper into the bones of the land. Maple leaves fluttered down like confetti, painting the sidewalks in red and amber. It was the last weekend of October, and the annual Autumn Harvest Festival had turned the usually sleepy town into a carousel of laughter, music, and golden light. Emily Dawson, a 34-year-old schoolteacher with tired eyes and an easy smile, walked hand in hand with her daughter through the crowd, the scent of candied apples and roasted corn in the air. Lila, just 6, skipped beside her mother, pigtails bouncing, clutching a stuffed raccoon she had won earlier that morning. "This is the best day ever," Lila declared, her voice high and bright. Emily smiled, squeezing her daughter's hand. "And it's not over yet. I saved the best for last," she said, pointing toward the heart of the fairground, where an old-fashioned carousel spun slowly, its wooden horses rising and falling like waves. Lila gasped. The carousel, affectionately known as the Hollow Horse, was the centerpiece of the festival, a relic from the 1930s, repainted every decade, beloved by generations. As they approached, the music from the calliope grew louder, a haunting waltz echoing through the crisp air. Emily helped Lila climb onto one of the horses near the edge, chipped white paint, red saddle, golden pole spiraling into the sky. She buckled the safety strap carefully, making sure it was snug. Lila laughed, waving at her mom with both hands. "Take a picture!" Emily stepped back and snapped a photo, capturing her daughter's joy, the golden hour light kissing her cheek. The operator, an older man with a green Crescent Hollow Park jacket, tipped his cap and started the ride. The carousel began to spin slowly, the music picking up pace. Emily stood nearby watching, filming a short video. The horses rose and fell, kids squealed, the air swirled with cheer. One full revolution, she waved again. 3. But then nothing. Lila's horse came back around, empty. The safety belt was still buckled, locked into place. The horse moved up and down with mechanical rhythm, riderless. At first, Emily thought it was a mistake. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, stepped closer to the edge of the ride. Maybe Lila had ducked behind the horse, maybe she had slid off and was standing by the pole, laughing. But when the carousel stopped, and the operator blew his whistle, and the kids rushed off, there was no sign of her daughter. "Lila?" she called, circling the ride. "Lila, baby!" Nothing. The operator looked confused, then concerned, helping Emily search. Within minutes, staff were alerted, walkie-talkies crackling the ride's name again and again. "Lila!" Parents pulled their kids closer, whispering. A manager came running. Security joined in, and still no sign. Within 10 minutes, the park was locked down. Announcements echoed overhead, asking patrons to remain calm and stay within the premises. Volunteers and staff formed search parties, sweeping the grounds, checking bathrooms, booths, under benches, behind hay bales. Emily's breath came in gasps. Her hands trembled as she showed the photo she had just taken, her smiling girl on the carousel. To every staff member, every parent she passed, they called the police. Officer Teresa Blake, familiar from morning school crossings, was first to arrive. She took Emily aside, voice low and steady. "We'll find her," she promised, her hand on Emily's shoulder. By nightfall, news vans arrived. Crescent Hollow hadn't had a disappearance in decades. Reporters gathered near the gates, trying to film past the line of police tape now strung around the carousel. Emily sat on a bench nearby, arms wrapped around herself, eyes hollow. Somewhere in her brain, logic screamed that this couldn't happen. Not here, not in her town, not at a family festival. 2 hours into the investigation, something stranger surfaced. The security team reviewed footage from the 6 cameras surrounding the carousel. All of them, every single feed, went black for a full 2 minutes, starting exactly at 3:16 p.m., precisely the moment Lila vanished. The footage resumed at 3:18, seamless, without glitch before or after. The team ran diagnostics. There was no power outage, no system error, No tampering detected. Could it be someone hacked the system? One officer asked. It's isolated, not online, all internal, replied the tech. There's no way. So now they had a child gone without trace, in broad daylight, under direct supervision, on a mechanical ride surrounded by people, and zero visual evidence. Emily clung to Lila's stuffed raccoon, the one her daughter had begged to carry all day. She rocked slightly as if to soothe herself, her lips mouthing her daughter's name in a silent prayer. The town changed that day. Crescent Hollow, known for calm streets and cheerful traditions, became a place of whispers and locked doors. People talked of curses, of shadows in the woods, of how something like this had happened once before, a long time ago, though no one would say it out loud. And Emily, she never left the town. She never stopped searching, not even when everyone else told her to move on. A week after the disappearance, the fairgrounds were deserted, the carousel fenced off with thick yellow tape, silent and still, like a gutted monument. Emily returned every day, sometimes twice, ignoring the stares, the murmurs. The festival had packed up days ago, leaving behind flattened grass, crushed popcorn cups, and remnants of happier moments now blurred by horror. Emily wandered past the empty stalls, past the benches where she and Lila had shared cotton candy, and made her way to the park's lost-and-found trailer. The young attendant looked startled to see her again, but didn't stop her. She had become something of a ghost herself around here. She didn't speak, only opened drawers, flipped through boxes, touched each item like it might still carry her daughter's warmth. At the bottom of a plastic bin labeled Thursday Miss, her fingers closed around something hard, cold, and heartbreakingly familiar. A plastic heart-shaped pendant, purple and scratched from age. It hung from a frayed elastic cord that had once been white. Emily's knees buckled slightly. She remembered that necklace. Lila had picked it out of a vending machine the week before, clutched it proudly like treasure. "It's magic," she told Emily with absolute sincerity. "It protects you if you believe in it." Emily had smiled and said, "Then you should never take it off." Now it sat in her palm, broken, crusted with a dark brown smear near the clasp. It wasn't dried blood. The color was off, more like oil, viscous, with a faint chemical smell. She sniffed it once, winced, then tucked the pendant into a plastic evidence bag she had begun carrying in her purse. She didn't trust the police to see what she saw. Not anymore. Back home, she studied it under a desk lamp, but nothing more revealed itself. No initials, no marks, no clue who had turned it in. Just one more echo of her daughter, just enough to shatter her again. Later that night, Emily sat hunched over her laptop, the blue glow making her eyes sting. She had posted about Lila's case every day since the festival, photos, theories, even her own phone number. Most of it attracted nothing but silence or the occasional troll. But tonight, something was different. A girl named Jody had messaged her on Instagram. "Hey, I was at the festival. I think I have a picture with the carousel in the background. Didn't realize until I saw the news. Want me to send it?" Emily's fingers shook as she typed back a frantic yes. Seconds later, the photo appeared. A blurry group of teenagers smiling in the foreground, posing awkwardly with sugar skull face paint. Behind them, the carousel loomed, lights spinning, horses gleaming. At first glance, nothing stood out, but when Emily zoomed in, her breath caught. Just behind the horse Lila had been riding, slightly blurred but distinct in outline, stood a man in a forest green maintenance uniform, arms crossed, face turned toward the camera, but obscured by shadow. The patch on his sleeve read, "Crescent Hollow Park Maintenance," in looping yellow embroidery. Emily sent the image to Officer Blake, expecting urgency. Instead, she got confusion. "That's not one of our current employees," Blake said over the phone. "Uniform doesn't match. Ours changed design about 10 years ago." "I'll ask around." The next morning, Emily drove to the park office herself. The supervisor, a balding man named Curtis, met her with tired eyes. "He's haven't used that patch in a decade," he said, glancing at the printed photo. "I've worked here since 2012, and I've never seen that guy." Emily's throat tightened. Could it be a retired worker, someone returning? Curtis frowned. "Doubt it. Old uniforms were shredded when we switched. Besides, we account for everyone during the festival. Every shift logged. No gaps." Emily asked to see the list. He hesitated, then handed her a clipboard. 37 names. She read each one aloud. None sounded familiar. Then she asked, "What about Elliot Mercer?" Curtis blinked. "Who?" "Elliot Mercer," she repeated. "Worked here back in the early 2000s. Maintenance." He scratched his chin. "That name rings a bell, but no, he's not on here. Wasn't part of the team this year." Emily didn't say anything. She just nodded, laughed, and sat in her car gripping the steering wheel. Elliot Mercer. The name had come to her in a dream the night before, whispered in her daughter's voice. She had dismissed it as the desperation of a mother's grief, but now she wasn't sure. She went home and typed his name into a search bar. At first, nothing relevant appeared. Then, buried in an archived town newsletter from 2004, she found a single mention. Local boy Elliot Mercer, age 7, went missing from Crescent Hollow Park during the Harvest Festival. He was found 3 days later hiding in the woods near the old maintenance shed, dehydrated but unharmed. The explanation was given for his disappearance. The ride he vanished from? The same carousel now at the heart of this year's tragedy. Emily stared at the screen, hands trembling. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew now. It had happened before, and somehow no one had ever told her. She glanced toward the photo of Lila on her wall, smiling from the carousel's saddle. Behind her daughter, that shadow of a man loomed again in her mind, frozen in old fabric and half a smirk, just enough to say he'd been watching the whole time. Winter had come and gone, spring passed in a blur, and by the time the crisp winds of October returned, the carousel at Crescent Hollow stood like a haunted relic behind a rusted fence, its horses still frozen mid-leap, the music long since silenced. 1 year had passed since Lila vanished, and though the town moved on, new festivals, new memories, families that came and went, Emily had not. She no longer taught at the school. Her days revolved around Lila's case, her home transformed into an archive of clues, maps, photos, and dates that lined the walls like wallpaper. When the power anomaly forced Crescent Hollow Park to temporarily shut down for repairs, most residents shrugged it off as poor wiring or outdated equipment, but Emily saw opportunity. That weekend, under a moonless sky, she parked her car a block away and crossed through the woods, heart pounding with every step. She wore black, carried bolt cutters and a flashlight in her backpack, and kept checking over her shoulder even though no one was supposed to be around. The gate to the carousel's maintenance lot had 2 locks. She clipped them both in under 2 minutes, heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, the lot was eerie in its silence. The carousel loomed in the distance, its chip paint and faded horses glowing faintly under a faulty overhead light that buzzed intermittently. Emily bypassed it for now, heading toward the rear building labeled Equipment Storage, Staff Only. The door creaked when she opened it, and a pungent mix of oil, metal, and mold hit her nose. Inside, rows of shelves lined with spare parts, rusted motors, wires, and plastic bins created a dim maze. She swept her flashlight over each label, searching for anything related to electrical systems. Near the back, an open metal cabinet caught her attention. The labels read, Junction Components, Primary Supply. Her hands moved automatically, scanning behind coils of cable until her fingers brushed against something soft. She paused, shining the light deeper into the cabinet. There, wedged between 2 fuses, was a small pair of shoes, warm, muddied, but unmistakably child. Emily yanked them out, gasping. One shoe was torn at the heel, the Velcro strap hanging loose. The toe of the right shoe was stained with dried red mud. She remembered those shoes. She had bought them for Lila on a whim from a roadside thrift store during a weekend trip last year. The smile on Lila's face when she tried them on had lit up the entire kitchen. Emily clutched the shoes to her chest and stumbled back, light trembling in her grip. Why were they hidden in a cabinet meant for electrical parts? Who would have placed them there, and when? As she staggered out of the storage building, the night felt colder. The carousel loomed ahead, still as death. Emily's breath clouded in front of her. She took a few steps toward it, unable to stop herself. She pressed a hand to the cold brass pole of the nearest horse and whispered her daughter's name. Then the hum of her phone broke the silence, and a notification. Instead, her blood chilled. A message from an anonymous sender. No words, just an image. A photo of her own mailbox at home, taken that night. She bolted from the park, shoes in hand, heart in her throat. By the time she returned home, breathless and shaking, her mailbox was closed and empty. Nothing out of place, but inside her front door, just beneath the mail slot, lay a single, bumpy envelope. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a postcard, its edges torn, its surface textured like handmade paper. The front image wasn't printed, but drawn in pencil and red ink. It showed the carousel at night. Its horses disturbed their eyes, black voids. Blood dripped from the platform, staining the ground below. But it was the figure inside the carousel that made Emily's vision blur. A tiny girl curled in a glass box at the center of the ride, her hands pressed against the wall, mouth open in a silent scream. Red ink streaked down from her eyes, and around her were etched words so faint Emily had to squint. No clue who had sent it. Emily placed the shoes beside the postcard on her dining table and stared at them for hours, replaying the sequence of events in her mind. Someone had those shoes for nearly a year. Someone had gone to the effort to draw that card, to take that photo of her mail Marcus in real time. This wasn't some sick prank. It was deliberate, personal, targeted. Whoever it was knew Lila, or knew what happened to her. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she cross-referenced every staff record, every contractor, every electrician who had ever worked on the carousel or maintenance areas. But one name kept slipping between the cracks, showing up only in fragments. Elliot Mercer, the boy who went missing in 2004, found in the woods, never explained. Her mind spun with connections, spirals that kept circling back to the same place: the shoes, the mud, the postcard, the carousel. She knew she had to go back, not during the day, not with the cops. She had to see under the carousel. She had to know if the box from the postcard, if the blood, if the girl was real. Because if it was, 3 months after receiving the haunting postcard and discovering Lila's shoes hidden inside the park's electrical cabinet, Emily was drowning in silence again. The carousel had since been dismantled for upgrades, but no public statements were made about what was, or wasn't, found beneath it. Emily had waited, pushed, begged for answers, but authorities insisted no human remains, no traces of anything unusual, were recovered. It made her feel like she had hallucinated the entire night, like she had invented the evidence she now kept locked inside a box beneath her bed. That was until one Saturday afternoon when her doorbell rang and she found Officer Teresa Blake standing there with an expression that didn't belong in a routine visit. Blake held a file in one hand and hesitated before speaking. "We got a call from state authorities," she began. "Here's a girl. She was found wandering near a convenience store in Pendleton, over 3 hours from here. She's around the same age Lila would be, and, well, you need to see her for yourself." Emily's heart climbed into her throat. She followed Officer Blake to the police SUV without a word. During the ride, she flipped through the file, blurry surveillance images of a thin girl in oversized clothes, hair in tangles, but unmistakably familiar. Too familiar. Her nose, her cheeks, the exact curve of her jawline. When they reached the juvenile psychiatric unit in Pendleton, Emily's hands were already shaking. The building looked sterile and overexposed, sunlight glaring off the windows as if it were trying to keep shadows at bay. A nurse escorted them to the observation room, where Emily stood behind a one-way mirror and watched the girl sit motionless at a table, eyes downcast, fingers moving slowly over a box of crayons. It was Lila. It had to be. But when Emily whispered her name, the nurse only shook her head. "She hasn't spoken, not once. Won't make eye contact, no identification, no memory. She's nonverbal, selective mutism, maybe trauma." "We're still assessing." Emily pressed her hand to the glass, tears forming. "Has anyone done DNA testing?" "Yes," Officer Blake answered, voice low. "We got the results this morning. She's not Lila." The words punched the air out of her lungs. "That's not possible." "I'm sorry," Blake said, but her eyes flicked toward the girl with uncertainty. "There's more. The test did confirm something else. Her biological mother's identity came up in the system. A woman named Darlene Kramer went missing about a year ago, same week Lila disappeared. Her case never went national. She was listed as a transient, single mom, mental health issues. No one reported it until months later." Emily felt a cold ripple down her spine. 2 disappearances, same week, same region. 2 mothers, 2 daughters, 1 girl returned without memory, 1 mother never found. She watched the child through the glass again. The resemblance was uncanny, yet the science said otherwise. Still, something gnawed at the edge of logic, something that defied clean timelines and DNA matches. Back at home that evening, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the girl's eyes, how empty they were, and yet how they flickered for a second when her fingers brushed that red crayon. The next morning, she drove back to Pendleton alone and begged the nurse for 5 minutes, face to face. It wasn't protocol, but the nurse finally agreed. Inside the sterile room, Emily sat across from the girl in silence. She didn't say Lila's name. She didn't cry. She simply placed a photo on the table, a picture of Lila from the festival riding the carousel. The girl didn't react at first, but then her eyes slowly lifted. Her fingers crept toward the photo, hovered over the painted horse, then dropped to her lap again. The girl hesitated. Then, without a word, she picked up the red crayon and began to draw. For the next 20 minutes, Emily watched, speechless, as the girl filled one page after another. Always the same image. A carousel, sometimes it spun, sometimes it bled. Sometimes a little girl sat inside a glass box at the center. But the details were unmistakable. Its 12 horses, its twisted golden poles, the chipped paint on the 3rd stall from the left. One page even included the tiny sign nailed into the center beam, "The Hollow Horse, 1936. Emily gathered the drawings when the session ended. The nurse was pale when she flipped through them. "She's never drawn anything before," she whispered. "How does she know what this looks like?" "I don't know," Emily replied, though a cold certainty had already begun to form. That carousel was demolished last month. That design hadn't existed online in decades. The only way this girl could know it was if she had been there. And the only children who had ever vanished around it were Lila, and now, the daughter of a missing transient woman no one remembered. Later that night, Emily reviewed Darlene Kramer's case file. There were no known family photos. No one had come forward to identify her body because it had never been found. But her last known location? Less than 10 miles from Crescent Hollow Park. The file noted that Darlene had reported strange dreams and hearing music late at night near the edge of the woods. She told neighbors she felt drawn to a spinning sound near the old train tracks where, curiously, the original base of the carousel had once been stored before being moved to the festival grounds. Emily didn't know what frightened her more, that the girl in the ward might be someone else's daughter trapped in Lila's body, or that Lila might still be somewhere else, waiting for her turn to come back. The images of the carousel drawn by the mute girl continued to haunt Emily long after she left the psychiatric ward. She kept them carefully stored in a plastic binder, slipping them into her purse and pulling them out in moments of silence when her thoughts spiraled too deep to control. The detail, the precision, those drawings were not the scribbles of a traumatized child. They were architectural renderings of something too specific, too secret to be coincident. The ride had been disassembled weeks before, the grounds fenced off and locked, but Emily knew pieces of it remained. The town had no plans for the area yet, and the core platform had not been moved. It was still there, just under tarp and plywood, forgotten, ignored. She visited the site again, as she always did. That night was colder than usual, wind slicing through the trees, carrying the scent of damp leaves and rust. She stood at the edge of the fence, her breath curling in the air, hands gripping the chain links. That's when she heard it, a rasping voice from the shadows. "You keep coming back," the voice said, and she turned to see a frail, hunched figure emerging from behind a trash bin. He wore 3 coats, layered over a moth-eaten sweater, and his beard tangled into his scarf. His name was Jude. She recognized him vaguely, one of the town's ghost people, the ones you pretended not to see as they rifled through dumpsters or muttered to themselves near the library steps. "I saw you last week," he said, eyes glinting with something between suspicion and sorrow. "You look like the one who cried over the fence." Emily tensed, unsure whether to retreat or respond. "I lost someone," she said quietly. Jude nodded, like he already knew. "A girl, small one, likes purple." Her breath caught. "How do you know that?" Jude glanced over his shoulder. Because she used to sit there, he said, pointing toward the edge of the carousel platform, now buried under tarp. Middle of the night. Not really her, but something shaped like her. She waved once. Then she was gone. Emily stared. What do you mean, shaped like her? She came out when the ride turned by itself. No music, no lights, just movement. Like it was remembering. When did this happen? 3 a.m., Jude whispered. Always 3. I watched it for weeks, thought I was dreaming the first time, but it kept happening. Quiet. Nobody touched it, nobody near it. Then the little thing would show up, sit still like a statue. I stopped looking after a while. Emily felt the chill deepen. Did you ever tell anyone? She scoffed. Who would listen to me? A man with no house, no name? People look at me and see dirt. I'm listening now, Emily said. He squinted at her. You want to know what's under it, don't you? Beneath the ride? She nodded. Jude leaned closer. I saw them one night, men in vests. They opened a square in the middle. Metal hatch. Looked like a vault door. They went in with flashlights, came out pale. Didn't talk over the door. She asked, week after the girl vanished. Emily drove straight to the police station that night. She didn't sleep, didn't hesitate. She demanded to see Blake, slammed the binder of drawings onto her desk, described Jude's claims in exact detail. To her surprise, Blake didn't scoff. She didn't dismiss. She stared at the carousel sketches, then leaned back, fingers stamped. But if there's nothing under there, Emily. This all goes back to evidence locker purgatory. Emily agreed. The next morning, under strict supervision, a team of 5 officers, 2 maintenance workers, and Blake herself entered the park. They pulled back the tarps, removed the plywood, and reached the circular base where the carousel's support had once been fixed. Jude watched from a bench across the street, huddled in his layers, muttering prayers under his breath. It took 15 minutes to locate the seam in the wood, tend to clear dirt and debris. Then one of the workers tapped his crowbar against something hollow, metal under soil. A few shouts later, they unearthed a hidden hatch, no more than 4 feet wide, bolted shut with industrial clamps. Blake radioed for permission, then they opened it. The hatch groaned, revealing a steep drop with rusted ladder rungs descending into darkness. The officers shined their lights. What they saw stopped them cold. It wasn't a tunnel or a utility space. It was a sealed room, concrete walls, the floor littered with old paper and bolts. In the center stood a single wooden carousel horse, much smaller than the ones above, almost childless, carved crudely, its face twisted in a grin too wide for its frame. Around it were narrow wooden benches, nailed into the ground like theater seating, facing the horse, all circling inward. And on the far wall, chalk drawings, hundreds of them, repeated symbols, spirals, horses, glass boxes. Most were smudged, as if wiped away by small hands. This isn't a maintenance room, one officer muttered. It's some kind of model. Emily descended last. When her foot touched the floor, she felt it like a memory saddled to her. She stepped toward the miniature horse, noticing now that its saddle bore initials. She traced them with her fingertip. Then the floor vibrated faintly, not enough to alert the officers, but enough to stir something in her chest. She turned to Blake. This isn't just a model, it's a rehearsal. For what? Blake asked. Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on a faint red handprint smeared across the baseboard, smaller than a child. The red handprint lingered in Emily's mind, like the final brushstroke of a nightmare she had only begun to understand. For the next several days she spent every hour obsessively documenting what they had found beneath the carousel, sketching from memory, scanning police reports, and tracing every name on the carousel's service logs she had once archived but dismissed. Among a long list of part-time workers and city contractors, one name jumped out now with jarring clarity. E. Mercer. The initials matched the service forms from 3 years earlier when Crescent Hollow Park underwent restoration. Elliot Mercer. She recognized the name vaguely, something she'd come across early in her search but had ignored. Another faceless worker in the system, but after seeing that eerie mock carousel hidden underground, after feeling the unmistakable echo of something ancient and ritualistic in that room, she no longer believed in coincidences. She began digging. What she found was a case buried under layers of silence and small-town forgetting. Elliot Mercer had gone missing in 2004 at the age of 7 during the Harvest Festival. The ride in question? The same carousel. The circumstances nearly identical to Lila's. One moment he was riding the second horse from the left, and when it completed the next turn, he was gone. No camera footage, no witnesses. The only difference was that he had returned, 3 years later, found wandering outside a gas station 2 towns away, barefoot, mute, and covered in dirt. He never spoke a word again. His family moved away shortly afterward, and the case dissolved into obscurity. But according to public work records, Elliot returned to Crescent Hollow in his early 20s and quietly took a job as part of the municipal maintenance team. He stayed off-grid, avoided social events, declined interviews. His name resurfaced briefly when the carousel underwent a full restoration 7 years ago. The logs noted him as the primary installer responsible for the ride's electrical reconfiguration and updated safety systems. Emily stared at his file for hours, heart pounding. It couldn't be coincidence. The boy who vanished from the same ride returned mute, then grew up to rebuild it only for another child to disappear under eerily identical conditions. She searched for more. There were no recent photos, no social media. She only found a single blurry image attached to an obituary. Elliot Mercer was dead. According to the report, he had died 3 weeks before Lila's disappearance. Cause: suicide. He had hung himself in the maintenance garage behind the park office. No note, no known relatives. The article was short, sandwiched between local sports and a fire safety PSA. She reread the date. October 2nd, just 21 days before everything repeated. The gravity of it sank in slowly. The carousel had been updated by the very boy it had once taken, and that boy had left no trace behind, except maybe in that secret chamber beneath the ride, where the walls remembered what he never said. Emily printed the obituary and tacked it to her investigation wall. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She visited the garage where he had died. It was locked, unused since the maintenance team relocated. With a crowbar and trembling resolve, she forced the side door open. Inside, the air was stale with oil and mildew. Cobwebs veiled old workbenches, and cardboard boxes leaned against rusted cabinets. In the far corner, a broken ladder rested against a beam. A heavy-duty rope, frayed at the end, still hung there like an accusation. Emily's breath trembled as she stepped into the center of the room, scanning for something, anything, that connected Elliot to what had happened to Lila. She found it in a drawer, a small notebook, leather-bound, pages yellowed with time. The first half was filled with maintenance diagrams, power load calculations, lighting circuits, all carousels. But the latter pages shifted. Dozens of them. A circle of horses. A girl inside a glass case. The same symbols from the underground room. Each page more frantic than the last, ink pressed hard into the paper as if he were carving meaning into the fibers. One line appeared over and over in blacky, uneven letters. It needs to complete the cycle. On the final page, a child's name was written 5 times. Lila Dawson, followed by the date, October 23rd. Emily nearly dropped the notebook. He had written her daughter's name weeks before the disappearance. He had known. She took everything, book, blueprints, a photo of the rope, and left before the sun went down. At home, she pieced the timeline together again. Elliot went missing on the carousel, returned after 3 years without explanation. He never spoke, but when he reached adulthood, he rebuilt the same ride. Not just repaired it, redesigned it. And somewhere during that process he must have remembered, not in words, but in lines and simples and obsession. What had happened to him? What had the ride done? The notebook held no clear answers, but one sketch chilled her more than all the rest. It was of a gear assembly, part of the carousel's core mechanism. A hand-drawn arrow pointed to a small concealed switch labeled in red ink. Manual trigger, deep cycle mode. Below it, scrawled in jagged print, the words, "Never access a deep cycle mode, carousel manuals, city records, anything mechanical." Nothing came up. It was a term that only Elliot knew, or invented, and if he had invented it, why? And what would it do if triggered? She returned to the blueprint and found a note beside the wiring diagram for the base panel. The last thing Elliot ever wrote. One child goes in, another comes back. The gears don't forget, they just reset. Emily didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. After discovering Elliot Mercer's notebook, Emily felt as though she had been pulled into a deeper layer of the truth, one where logic and timelines blurred, where cause and effect no longer obeyed the rules she had once believed unshakable. She spent hours cross-referencing the diagrams, his sketches, his scribbled messages. "It needs to complete the cycle. One child goes in, another comes back." Lines that chilled her more than she could explain. But buried in that horror was something worse. A date. October 23rd, the same day Lila vanished the year prior. Elliot had written that date repeatedly, weeks before it happened. He had known something was coming. That knowledge burned in her chest like acid, driving her back to every piece of the past she had ignored, every photograph she had filed away in drawers and cloud drives. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she opened her laptop and launched the photo archive from her old external drive. Years of birthdays, holidays, school events, and lazy Sunday mornings cataloged in digital perfection. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for at first, only that some thread, some presence might reveal itself if she studied closely enough. She started with the obvious, the last few months before Lila disappeared. Nothing. Then she went back 2 years, to a bright summer day in June when she and Lila had visited the Crescent Hollow Park for a free community picnic. There were balloons, face painting, and Emily remembered vividly how Lila had been obsessed with getting a butterfly on her cheek. She found the pictures, dozens of them, Lila smiling in the sunlight, ice cream dripping down her chin, purple butterfly paint curling along her temple. In one of the last photos from that afternoon, Lila stood near the edge of the Carousel platform, holding her mother's hand, staring up at the horses. Emily's hand shook slightly as she zoomed into the background, her gut tightening as a shape came into focus. Behind them, not fully centered, barely captured at the edge of the frame, stood a tall figure in a dark green maintenance uniform. He wasn't looking at the ride. He was looking directly at Lila. Emily sat back, heart thudding, bile rising in her throat. She had seen that uniform before, forest green with faded yellow embroidery and shoulder stripes, same as the one worn by the man in the selfie taken by the group of teens at the festival the day Lila vanished. She pulled both images onto her screen, side by side. The silhouettes matched exactly. Same posture, same sleeve pattern, same patch on the left arm. But there was a problem. According to park records, those uniforms hadn't been issued in over 15 years. She knew that because she had scoured maintenance history when she first began investigating. The Crescent Hollow Parks Department had undergone a full rebranding in 2010. New logo, new uniforms, new contractors. The forest green jackets with yellow stitch were last listed in inventory in 2004. Elliot Mercer had worn one just like it, in the only surviving photo taken of him as an adult. She tore open her storage bin, pulled out the physical folder with printouts from early in her investigation, and found it, the staff portrait taken after the 2008 Carousel restoration. There, in the back row, mostly obscured by taller workers, was a pale, thin man with sunken eyes and that same exact uniform. No name tag. But Emily knew. It was Elliot. Her hands went numb as she returned to the family photo. The more she zoomed, the more surreal it became. The figure's face was obscured by light flare, but it wasn't a camera artifact. It was as if his features simply didn't exist, a hollow smear where eyes should have been. Not a glitch, not motion blur, an absence. A deliberate one. She tried adjusting brightness, contrast, sharpness. Nothing emerged, just that same impossibly smooth void. But what unsettled her more than anything was Lila's expression in the photo. The girl wasn't smiling. She wasn't even aware of the camera. She was looking up at the man behind her, eyes wide, as if recognizing someone from a dream. Not fear, not joy, something stranger, like memory. Like she'd seen him before, Emily printed the photo, pinned it beside Elliot's obituary, then stared at the wall in horror. Had he been following them long before Lila vanished? Had the ride chosen her years ago? Was the cycle longer than a single turn? In desperation, she called the records office and requested archived security footage from the 2019 festival, the one before Lila disappeared. It took 3 days for the city to respond, and when they did, they claimed the footage from that week had been corrupted during a server update. Another dead end. But by now, Emily didn't believe in server errors. She believed in patterns. In loops. She needed someone who understood that, and there was one place she hadn't yet gone, One place where silence might still echo the truth. The old maintenance locker, the one Elliot had used, the one where he died. She returned there at dusk, pried open the same rusted door with a screwdriver, and stepped inside. Dust coated everything, but the air felt different now, charged, heavier. She scanned the room, this time focusing not on the workbench, but the walls. Hidden behind a shelf of unused parts, she found it. A narrow wooden panel nailed into the concrete, just wide enough to be a storage cubby. She pried it open. Inside was a plastic folder, sealed with duct tape and labeled, in trembling, handwritten letters, "Shadow Proscribed." She took it home and opened it under a single lamp in her living room. Inside were 20 pages of notes, diagrams, and sketches, all focused on time, rotation, and something he called identity transfer intervals. One note said, if the ride sees her once, she becomes part of the memory. Doesn't matter if it's years before, the cycle starts when it once. 2 children, one fading, one emerging. And then, at the bottom of the stack, she found a Polaroid. It was dated June 2019. It showed Lila. And behind her, in perfect clarity, stood Elliot Mercer. Smiling, the photograph of Elliot Mercer standing behind Lila in 2019 obliterated any remaining illusion Emily had about this being just a string of eerie coincidences. She stared at it for hours, each minute deepening her certainty that the carousel wasn't just a relic or a machine. It was a mechanism designed with purpose, possibly by someone who had once been its victim, and now its architect. The symbols Elliot had scrawled, the whispers about cycles and memory, the muteness of the girl who drew what no child should have known. It all pointed to something not just dangerous, but intelligent in its own mechanical way. The carousel didn't operate on engineering alone. It remembered, and perhaps, like Elliot wrote, it reset. But how? She needed someone to dig deeper than she could, to dissect the mechanics with an expert's eye. That's when she contacted Nathan Klein, an independent electrical engineer she'd found on a local whistleblower forum. He had worked with theme park systems before, including rides with outdated analog controls and legacy automation. She sent him everything, photos of the underground room, Elliot's schematics, system logs, even the diagram labeled. Nathan agreed to meet at her house, and for 3 days straight they worked from her living room, poring over stolen documents and hardware blueprints like decoding a time bomb. On the 3rd day, Nathan looked up from his laptop with a furrowed brow. "I need access to the real control box," he said. "I know the city's locked it, but if you can get me even an hour inside the park, I'll tell you what this thing's actually doing at night." Emily knew a back way in. The following night, long after sunset, she led him through the maintenance entrance, now covered in loose fencing and weather-worn warning signs. The carousel, stripped of decorations but still structurally intact, loomed like a skeletal beast under the moonlight. Nathan pried open the electrical housing with practiced ease. Inside, dust blanketed the switches, but the control board was powered, the tiny LED on the corner pulsing faint green. "That's weird," he murmured. "Shouldn't be live." He connected a diagnostic tool to the main interface and began pulling logs. Emily stood watch, flashlight held low, trying not to think about the last time she had seen this place spin, without music, without riders, just motion, as if it were stretching in its sleep. Nathan's screen flashed with a cascade of data. "This thing's been activating on its own," he said slowly. "It's triggered movement cycles 17 times in the last 3 months, always between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m. It's not on a timer, these aren't scheduled events, they're random." Emily's throat tightened. Could it be someone manually powering it on? He shook his head. Without logging in, the system requires passcode authentication, and there's no login data attached to any of the midnight cycles. It's like it just starts. He dug further, opening sensor readouts from those nights. On one particular night, October 14th at 3:13 a.m., a motion sensor beneath the central column recorded something even more troubling. "Pressure reading," he said aloud. "Minimal but consistent, around 72 pounds, sustained for 6 seconds. Located exactly where the old hatch was uncovered." "Not someone," he corrected. "Or something. 72 pounds is too light for an adult, but it's about the weight of a child." The words settled in the cold air between them. Nathan clicked through the data again, switching to thermal records. Though the carousel had no heating mechanism, an anomaly appeared in the center mass during the same time frame, a warmth spike where no electricity flowed. Just for a moment. Then nothing. Like something crawled up, stood there, and left. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the blueprint Elliot had drawn of the gear mechanism. "This is what he meant," she whispered. "The gears don't forget, they just reset. He wasn't talking about mechanical failure, he meant memory." Nathan glanced over, skeptical. "Machines don't remember, people do." "No," Emily said, eyes locked on the diagram. "He meant the machine remembers people. Like it stores them." Nathan said nothing, but he didn't argue either. Instead, he opened the maintenance logs again and traced the earliest unauthorized activation. It dated back years, far before Lila, back to 2009, 2 years after Elliot was rehired. A series of unexplained activity spikes clustered around festival season, especially in October. "Started when he came back," Nathan muttered, "like he woke it up again." He dug even deeper, decoding a corrupted file Elliot had encrypted. Inside were audio logs, static-filled, faint, distorted. One clip caught their attention, a soft click, then a low hum, followed by a child's voice, barely audible. "I was here, then I wasn't. It's cold under the wood." Emily backed away from the laptop. She had heard that voice before, in her dreams, in her memories, in Lila's whisper when she was 4, playing near the carousel, saying something about the girl on the floor. She stared at the motion data, at the weight reading, at the time log, 3:13 IMM, and realized the carousel wasn't just active, it was listening. It was responding. And perhaps, even now, it was waiting. The ride had spoken. That was the only conclusion Elamy could draw from the chilling audio Nathan had extracted from the corrupted files. He had left the flash drive on her kitchen counter that morning, saying nothing beyond a brief nod and a single sentence. "Take this to someone who understands sound better than me." Emily held the drive like it might bite, uncertain whether she feared its contents or the questions it had already begun to answer. That night she drove 2 hours to Eugene, Oregon, to meet with Carla Hennings, an audio engineer and forensic analyst known for work on criminal cases involving distorted or manipulated recordings. She had read about Carla in an investigative podcast blog and had reached out impulsively, desperate for someone to help her decode the quiet voices she was beginning to believe were not only real, but trapped. Carola's office was unassuming, wedged between an insurance agency and a pet crematorium. Inside, the space smelled faintly of coffee and warm plastic, filled with racks of audio equipment and an old Yamaha keyboard in the corner. Carola, mid-40esque, with glasses that caught every glint of light, greeted her with curiosity more than suspicion. They sat, Emily barely speaking, letting the Hingy plug in the drive and run the files through multiple filters. The hum came first, subtle, rhythmic, mechanical, but not symmetrical, like something struggling to maintain balance. Then the static, layered, flickering like the hiss of wind through wires. Carla adjusted frequency isolators, scrubbed the file for subsonic signals, and leaned in, brow furrowed. "There's something embedded," she murmured, increasing the gain. "Under the 18-inch cramps threshold. It's human." Emily's heart pounded. Carla rewound and played it again, slower. And there it was, buried under distortion, barely audible but chillingly clear. A breath, rapid, uneven. Then a whisper, small and urgent. "I'm here, not done yet." The voice was unmistakably that of a child, female, soft, and caressed, as if speaking through fabric or from beneath something heavy. Carla looked at her with caution. "You said this was from a carousel system? What the hell is running under that thing?" Emily explained in fragments about the ride, the history, the missing children, the man who returned only to rebuild what once took him. Carla didn't interrupt, only nodded slowly, as if trying to make peace with a story that no longer belonged in the realm of fiction. Then she asked a question Emily hadn't anticipated. "What was the RPM?" Emily blinked. "What?" "The carousel. How fast was it spinning when this was recorded?" Emily hesitated. "Standard speed, I think." Carola frowned. No, this file only activates at a very specific frequency band. I ran simulations. It only becomes audible when the vibration pitch hits 3.76 Hz. That would require rotational speed far above standard safety regulations. Almost double. In short, it only happens when the machine is being pushed past what it was built for. Emily's mouth went dry. You mean the voice only comes through when the ride is moving that fast? Carol nodded. Or when something else opens. Think of it like pressure building behind a sealed door. If you spin the key fast enough, the lock hums, the seal loosens, and something speaks. Emily stared at the wavefront on the screen. There were jagged lines, then sudden dips, fluctuations like a heartbeat, or perhaps a signal reaching out from behind something dense. Carla leaned back, visibly unnerved. I've analyzed corrupted communications from sunken submarines, black boxes from plane crashes. I've heard echoes in frequency distortion. But this isn't like that. This is directional. Like the message knows it's being received, like it's aimed at you. Emily left Carla's studio just past midnight, the flash drive clutched tightly in her fist, her brain spinning faster than the Carousel ever had. If the sound only emerged during high-speed rotation, then something in the mechanism was acting like a transmitter, or worse, like a conduit. What if the Carousel wasn't simply haunted or cursed, but built to function as a bridge, a point of contact between what was real and what had been lost, between physical space and something that operated outside the rules of time and matter? She thought back to Elliot's sketches, to the line he had etched into the last page of his journal. One child goes in, another comes back. It had never been metaphor. It had been mechanical, purposeful. Back home, she pulled out a portable speaker and played the file again, louder this time. The whisper returned, clearer now, the breath behind it even more desperate. I'm here, not done yet. Emily fell to her knees. Not done yet, not finished, not gone. The Carousel had taken her daughter into something else, somewhere built not of gears and steel, but of resonance and rotation. She stood suddenly, pulled open her closet, and grabbed her duffel bag. She packed the drive, her notes, Elliot's blueprints, and the photo, the one where he stood behind Lila in 2019, years after his own death. If the ride opened something when it spun fast enough, then it could be opened again. And this time, she would be waiting. The morning was quiet, like most days in Crescent Hollow now. The town's silence deepened not by time, but by what had settled in the gaps between memories. 6 years had passed since the ride was finally dismantled, its base removed, its structure sold for scrap. The grounds where it once stood had been paved over and turned into a flower bed, though nothing seemed to bloom there, no matter how many times they were planted. Emily still lived nearby, but she no longer taught, no longer spoke at town meetings, no longer walked the fairgrounds. She had done what no one else had dared. She had faced the machine, challenged its rules, and nearly broken herself in the process. No one believed her. No one ever found the gear hidden beneath the base again, nor the underground model chamber, nor Elliot's journals. Nathan vanished 3 months after sending her a final encrypted message that simply read, "The ride remembers." Emily lived quietly, sustained by what she had learned and lost, anchored only by the hope that one day, somehow, the cycle might return what it took. Then, one Monday in September, the principal of Crescent Hollow Elementary called the sheriff's office, and the message quickly reached Emily by word of mouth. A little girl had shown up alone at the front gate, wearing a lavender backpack, no name tag, no address, no guardian. When asked who she was, she only said one word, Lila. Emily drove without stopping, barely breathing, fingers clutching the wheel so tightly they ached. She knew, without logic or reason, without science or evidence, she knew. At the school, the secretary hesitated before letting her in, but the principal, an older man who had once been Emily's colleague, stepped out of his office with a stunned look on his face. "You need to see her," he said simply, and led her down the hallway to the art room. Inside, the children were finishing their morning activity, drawing Carousel animals in crayon for the fall bulletin board. At the back of the room sat a small girl, maybe 10 years old, with auburn hair and a solemn face too familiar to dismiss. She was drawing furiously, her fingers smudged with red and gray, her eyes unmoving. Emily stood in the doorway frozen. The girl looked up. The classroom around them vanished in that second, no voices, no clatter of crayons, only a stillness so total it rang. The drawing before the girl depicted a carousel, meticulously rendered in childlike lines, but with unnerving precision. 12 horses, spiral brass poles, a central platform carved with archaic symbols. But most horrifying of all were the 8 dark eyes drawn into the slats beneath the ride, watching from the cracks, open and wide and waiting. Emily stepped forward, heart hammering. The girl blinked slowly, then stood. She walked to Emily with no hesitation, no fear, and reached out. Emily knelt instinctively, unable to speak. The girl placed her hand on Emily's. It was warm, real, small. "I just took one turn," the girl whispered in a voice that cracked something inside Emily so deeply it almost broke her in half. "Did you wait for me?" Tears burst from Emily's eyes, but before she could respond, before she could say yes or grab her daughter and never let go again, the girl's hand began to fade, not abruptly, not like smoke, but slowly, gently, as if she were being pulled backward through glass. Her skin turned translucent, then her outline blurred, and in a final moment that lasted forever, her lips mouthed something Emily couldn't hear but felt deep in her bones. Then she was gone. All that remained on the floor between them was a small, cracked purple plastic heart on a frayed cord. Emily reached down with shaking fingers and picked up the necklace, the one Lila had once called her magic protection. It was warm. The cord still smelled faintly of strawberries and dust. Outside, the school bell rang. Inside, sat in silence, holding the last piece of her daughter and of herself. The cycle had completed. One child had returned, but perhaps, just perhaps, the carousel had never really been destroyed. Perhaps, like Eliot wrote, it had simply reset. If this story gripped you even half as much as it did me while writing it, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another mystery that unravels in the most unexpected ways. I'd love to know, what moment shocked you the most, and where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let's talk theories. Some cycle might still be turning.